I've been coaching Overwatch for quite a long time, and I've probably done hundreds and hundreds of VOD reviews up to this point, and there are many mistakes that I see players make every single game in every single VOD review. So these are the 5 biggest mistakes that could be holding you back from achieving the rank of your dreams and preventing you from climbing. But if you found my content helpful at all, I would really appreciate a subscribe and a like on this video, and let's get right in. Now, an incredibly common mistake that I see in just about every single VOD review I do, and that's players refusing to swap off a character because they have an ultimate, even though they want to swap up their character. Now, you can't even lie that this has been you. I know it has. It's been everybody. You got an ultimate and maybe you went out and died. And then you went out again and died. And you've had your ultimate for maybe 3 lives now, 4 lives now. And no matter what you do, you can't find an optimal situation to use your ultimate, but you don't want to swap. So you just keep going out again and again and again. And maybe you want to completely swap up your character. You know you want to swap up. You plan to swap up, but the enemy just keeps farming you and you never get that ultimate off. And the majority of the time, players get frustrated. They just push that ultimate through anyways, and it gets no value, right? I know this has been you, and it's a very easy mistake to fall into because you feel like you earned that ultimate and you got to get value out of it. But the reality of the situation is, 1, you will get a little bit of ult back just by swapping. You'll get that 30% back. That's a new Overwatch 2 change. And 2, it's going to be better for you to move on to the character that is more optimal and get more average value, plus build up to that character's ultimate instead. Now, this also could be symptomatic of you waiting too much to find that perfectly optimal moment to pop your ultimate. Oftentimes, ultimate should be used to kick off fights or to snowball an advantage, not necessarily trying to get that perfect 5-man gigantic multi-kill. You might be waiting all game to see that situation. But if the team fights aren't happening, your team are getting picked off early, or you're trying to set up a combo, then it could be legitimately the right decision to hold on to your ultimate. And in that situation, don't just force it through for no reason. Try to find optimal situations, but make sure that the average value your character is getting, even without their ultimate, is still high enough to justify you not swapping. Now, the next thing that I see very often in doing VOD reviews for Overwatch is players that don't understand what their role is in a composition. Like, what are you supposed to be doing? And if you can't answer that question about your character, then that is really bad, because every single character should know what their role is in a comp and what they should be doing in every single game. So let me give you this example. Let's say you're a Soldier 76 and you're just constantly spraying at the enemy's front line and you're not getting any kills. Well, that comes from a misevaluation in what your role is. Soldier's not a character that is most optimal at fighting on the front line. In fact, you could be shooting at a tank basically indefinitely and not accomplishing anything. Instead, Soldier should be playing adjacent to his team, off on the high ground, potentially putting pressure into enemy DPS and enemy support, and you can see that because it's reflected in his kit. He has a heal station, which means he doesn't have to play next to his healers, and he can still be self-sufficient. He has mobility to get out of any tricky situations if enemies come to contest him. He has his Helix, allowing him to incorporate a hit-and-run strategy, potentially getting a complete pick-off on the enemy DPS or support. Because he has all these tools, his optimal playstyle is not on the front line, but playing far adjacent to his team and trying to find key opportunities to get value. Now, I know sometimes it's hard to identify what you should be doing every single game, but the questions you should ask yourself is, what can my character do that other characters can't? What is my character good at that I should be exploiting? Now, I know this isn't a perfect picture, but if you want an in-depth VOD review, you can definitely hit me up in the Discord in the description down below. Now, the third biggest mistake that I see as a coach is players that will constantly rage at their teammates for assuming that they should be solving whatever problem you have. Let's say you die to a FAR, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna press tab. Look, there's a soldier on my team. It's his fault I died to the FAR. Let me rage at him. It's his fault. Now, there's several problems with this. The first one is you have no idea what that soldier went through. Maybe they didn't hit a crazy amount of shots, or maybe they were jumped on by multiple members of the enemy team, or the enemy FAR Mercy is actually a threat that one soldier alone should not be able to deal with. Regardless, blaming your team for your problems is never actually going to help you climb. It's your job to be the difference maker and the difference in your team that can help your team accomplish a task and enable them to do it better. If you're a Zen, discord the fire. If you're a diva, block the rockets. If you're a support, pocket your soldier. If you're something completely random, like a Genji, you could put extra pressure on their other support, forcing the Mercy to leave the fire. There's a million different things that you could do to help your teammate, and it's very easy to just blame them without looking inward. And I understand that you're going to have really bad teammates in some of your games. Trust me, I get it. I climbed all the way from silver to freaking top 500 in Overwatch 1. I know exactly what that's like. But the reality of the situation, and I want you to hear me here, you do not deserve teammates who will properly do their job until you can climb to the ranks that those players exist in. Now, the next big mistake that I see as an Overwatch coach is players not understanding who is winning in a fight. Now, if your team has a kill or multiple kills, the space and the aggression that your team is taking and you personally are taking should reflect the advantage that you have. If you have 1 kill advantage on the enemy, you should use that as an opportunity to take space, push up slightly more aggressively, and occupy more areas on the map. Now, that doesn't mean run straight into the enemy team, because that could get you killed and then it's back to a 4v4. But it does mean take space that's appropriate for that level of advantage. If you have 2 kills, that means you're pushing really aggressively. If you have 3 or more kills, that means you're going in to wipe the enemy team. Now, on the flip side, if you have a disadvantage, you should be backing up and giving space so that you don't die and get overwhelmed while looking for key opportunities to turn that disadvantage. Either getting a pick because the enemy makes a mistake, pushes in too aggressively, you're collapsing on someone that pushes out way in front of their team. If you don't die and back up, you will also eventually regroup with your person that is dead, and you will see a key opportunity potentially to punish an enemy's mistake. So, as a key rule of thumb, you have advantage, you're pushing in. You have disadvantage, you're backing up and looking for an opportunity. This is the general rule of thumb that you should be enacting, but far too often when I'm VOD reviewing players, there will be multiple kills on their side, and they're still standing there in choke, still waiting for someone to push in, still waiting for something to happen. And because they do that for so long, the enemy team actually manages to get a pick, they manage to take advantage of your lack of aggression, or they regroup and you lose a fight that you had no business losing. Now, before we get on to number 5, and perhaps the most important one in the entire video, let's talk about our honorable mention, which is absolutely terrible comms. And I'm talking about comms to the point where they're literally a detriment to you and your team. The first one is calling a target 1 HP when they're really not 1 HP. If that Zarya is at half health, she is not 1 HP, especially if she has multiple bubbles. If that Ana is at 150, she is not at 1 HP. Now, I do understand that you could be calling a target low and that target gets healed up. And I'm not talking about those situations. I'm just talking about you doing a little bit of damage to someone and calling them as if a Genji could dash them. If your hypothetical Genji couldn't dash someone, then you probably shouldn't call them 1 HP, because your teammates could assume that the call's correct and your monkey could jump in, your Genji could dash in, and that target wasn't actually that low at all. And now your teammates are in a very bad situation because they trusted the call, and they probably will never trust your call again. It would be far better for you to call out that Ana has no nade or that her positioning is isolated. These type of calls give more important information that is less likely to change in an instant. In addition to that, if you do want to focus a target, don't just say that the target's 1 HP, call the target. Say, let's focus this player, ping that player, and focus them yourself, and your team will follow suit. A great way to do this is actually echo calls, where you consistently call a target until it's dead. This is a very common scrim strategy where you call the target that you're on and you keep calling it over and over again so that no one on your team gets off task. Like, say, Zen, 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 Zen. I know it's annoying, but once the Zen is dead, you can stop calling Zen. And of course, there will be a situation where you might not be able to kill the Zen, but keeping people on focus and on target is oftentimes the best way to get that target priority, and then you move on to the next call, and that's another way to carry with comms. Now, as a last tidbit to bad calming, stop asking for healing in the first person. Saying I need healing and not telling any person who you are gives players very little idea about who you are. I mean, not only do they have to somehow sync the player you are to who's talking, but then they have to look around the map and find you, and by the time that happens, you're probably dead. It's way better to either ask for healing in the third person, say Cassidy needs heals, Cass needs heals, Genji needs heals, Ryan needs heals, whatever the case may be, or just ping that you need heals and say it simultaneously. Make your healers have the easiest possible job at healing you instead of getting pissed off when you called something that they didn't understand and they needed to understand it basically instantly or else you die. Now moving on to number 5, and this is one of the most important mistakes that I see, and if you nail this down, you will win games, I guarantee it, and it's identifying the win condition. You need to really identify who is carrying on the enemy team and who is feeding on the enemy team. There's always going to be a really great player or some great players, some really great performers, and there's always going to be some weak link. And it's really important that you identify who's doing the most. And you should also be identifying what's happening on your team as well. Like, let's say the enemy team has a really god tier tracer, and you have a garbage tier Zen, or a Zen that's constantly feeding into that tracer. Now, you could get mad, you could get angry, you could rage, but how about thinking about a way to position yourself to where you could easily help your Zen? You could easily prevent that tracer from getting value. Not only are you preventing their carry from popping off and getting the play they want to get off, but you're also preventing your feeder from feeding consistently. And now he's alive and, you know, contributing team value to the overall team fight. Learning this dynamic of who is constantly out of position and who is constantly making a really good and proactive play is a great way for you to give the appropriate respect where it's needed and trying to shut down the enemy team's carry while also abusing their weak link. And I will do this a ton on, let's say, Genji, for instance, where I see an enemy that is constantly out of position, like an Ana that's going for a very proactive play, or a Zen that is just kind of playing off, trying to get some duels. Those players I will target first, and I'll keep targeting them over and over and over again, and that becomes my win condition. The fact that they are not disciplined enough to position in a way that's hard for me to kill. And maybe they eventually back up, play together, play more safe, but that's fine because now the value is there. They're not going for these crazy plays anymore, and they're contributing less to the overall team fight, which helps me because now I focus something else and I don't even have to fight them anymore. Now, I know that oftentimes these win conditions can be hard to see, and sometimes when you're in the moment, it can be really hard to see who's popping off and who's carried and who's not doing a lot, but I would definitely try to have an open dialogue with your team, communicate. I know I said communication before, but it turns out if your supports are telling you that they're having a problem with the character, or your tank is telling you that he's having a problem with the character, or your DPS are having a problem winning a matchup, whatever the case may be, that is a problem that you're running into that if you can help address, that could be your route to a win condition. But if you can't, then the enemy is just going to win for free. Now keep in mind, these are the 5 biggest ones I've seen, but what could be affecting you could be very different. Now I plan to feature a VOD review on this channel, so if you want to potentially get selected, put your code and your rank in the comments down below. But thank you so much for coming by, smash that subscribe, and I'll see you next time.